Hello, good evening and welcome back. In today's video, how the NHS volunteers are receiving their first tasks, well done to 750,000 people, that Paris is now banning exercise because going outside at all is bad, and YouTube has decided that it wishes to continue its role as being a publisher instead of a platform, but still of course wanting as many protections as it can do and therefore will call itself a platform instead. So, NHS, let's start with some good news. The volunteers start receiving tasks. Yes, there are 750,000 people, their so-called volunteer army. Instead of supporting 1.5 million people from 250,000 people, they're supporting 2.5 million people from 750,000 people. So that's jolly good. So what are they going to be doing? Well, they'll have to deliver food and medicines, drive patients to appointments, and phone the isolated. And this is done through an app called Good Sam, it's in Good Samaritan, where health professionals, pharmacists, and local authorities can upload requests for help from Tuesday. So similar technology to what we see with Uber, of course, with the requirements, but then of course they're more detailed, and people who wish to take part will then decide, well, yes, I'm going to. But the main thing which most people seem to be wanting to do, which is what they're saying, is through phoning the isolated. That is something that they can do as a part-time job, if you will, in the evenings when people are feeling most alone, after the worker has finished their job. That is when they will be doing it. And of course, anybody who has the capability for moving about and is sick of being isolated will look forward to being able to deliver food and medicines. And it is nice to see, of course, that during these times of hardship, charity is winning through. Despite having a state-mandated National Health Service, individuals think, well, actually, there's more I could be doing, and I would like to be able to help out other people. Therefore, I will volunteer and provide that charity for other people, which almost suggests that the taxes are therefore unnecessary. If we can have people giving their labour so freely, then of course you don't need to provide people with so much money to pay for other services, as volunteers are there to step up in order to help out other people. One story which the BBC have decided to pick, which I love to mention, is Edward Butter Ellis, very kind gentleman, evidently, for being a volunteer, that he collected a pharmacy collection for a lady, and she didn't speak English. Yes, she's been in England for however long. She was using the NHS for her prescription and using a volunteer as well, and couldn't talk to him in the language of the country of which he's in, and therefore he had to use Google Translate. So of course the BBC are saying, oh, isn't he great for using technology to overcome the language barrier instead of trying to go through several other people to find somebody who speaks Portuguese. I think, well, I mean, good on him, and well done him for being that intelligent individual that wishes to help out other people, but I think that it's very misplaced that we've got ourselves to this situation in the first place. And I know that there were several nationalists who basically say, well, if you're over here for a year, after a year you can't speak English and you haven't got a job, then it's about time you go back. I think a year is long enough to learn a language. If you really mean to learn it, then you can definitely learn within a year. If you don't have the mental fortitude or willpower to do it, then you're not intelligent or dedicated enough to contribute to the society of which you want to move to, and therefore you're not welcome. You don't have a strong enough character in order to be a member of the contributive society of which we're trying to create here, in which case we don't want you, because you're not helping. Sounds harsh, but it's very fair. You get a whole year to learn, and of course you could actually stay in your own country and or in the country you're currently residing and learn English before you move, in which case you're going to enjoy it a lot more anyway, because you'll be able to integrate into the culture and understand what people are saying and doing, and be able to read signs and shops and menus and packaging, and it'll make a lot more sense to you. But unfortunately there are too many ghettos and the like where you don't have to speak English, that it does propagate. But there we go. That's the NHS. So well done to them. Paris has decided to ban daytime outdoor exercise between 10 a.m. and 7 p.m. local time to come into effect from Wednesday. This is because the death toll in France has risen above 10,000, the fourth highest figure after Italy, Spain, and the United States, given that they were counting French hospitals but not care homes. So they basically need to extrapolate out in order to find where everybody is that they're dying from coronavirus, not necessarily with coronavirus. But of course, by mentioning numbers that people are dying with coronavirus, even though in February, for example, the United Kingdom death toll was lower than it was last February during the same time period by a couple of thousand, out of about, I think it's 46 to 43,000 deaths. It's a job, so yeah, people are dying from coronavirus, and it might be, okay, well, during a flu season, it's still on track, this coronavirus, compared to flu, but it's increased. So, okay, well then let's look at total number of deaths. Is there an increase in deaths? Because if not, then it seems that, okay, our medicine and our advancements are so great that there aren't many things you can die from anymore. Predominantly being cancer, heart disease, car accidents, and then medical errors, including prescriptive errors. But they're the main four. Given that the fourth is a medical error, then it does suggest that we're doing bloody well, because so many people are reliant on the increased medication, in which case, yes, there aren't many things that you can die from anymore. So when coronavirus is coming up and taking out people, then it's one of the few things that they can die from. And that's why everybody is rushing to find a cure, because it's new. It's a novel coronavirus after all. So Paris has decided, yes, you need a license for that, and there's Emmanuel Macron, who I think is the inspiration for Rishi Sunak, essentially. They both have similar histories after all, and here we have a woman finding another woman for being outside, seeing as hundreds of thousands of people have been fined for being outside in Paris. They're not allowed more than half a mile outside of their home for their daily exercise, so now it's got to be in the morning or in the evening. Yes, they want women to exercise alone after 7 p.m. So progressive. But don't worry, because of course you can go out for exercise if it's in one of those multicultural neighbourhoods, because they don't want to try and enforce it there because of different cultural beliefs, don't you know. But last but not least, YouTube tightens rules after David Icke 5G interview. The man who thought he was the second coming of Christ after being a successful football commentator, and has now just gone full-blown conspiracy theories. So, when Mark Zuckerberg was given the same decision to make about Holocaust denial, for example, he said, well, yeah, I don't think that's correct. I think the Holocaust did happen, but it's not for me to decide what people say. After all, I am a platform, not a publisher. That is for them to say. Yeah, fair enough, very admirable. YouTube, on the other hand, is trying to say, yes, we'll host all sorts of content, but not that, not those conspiracy theorists. If you link 5G to the coronavirus, then we're going to take you down, we're going to demonetize you, and eventually ban your channel. Demonetize, but still run ads, of course, because we're going to be making money from you, because it isn't so objectionable that other people won't advertise, but we just don't want to have you see any reward for your time investment, which is why BitChute is, of course, such a good channel, a good medium to go to. Link in description. So now we have them deciding that they will remove people, despite saying that with the coronavirus outbreak, they have limited the amount of people who can review it, in which case it's more down to bots instead, which we know are very unreliable. The downside from this, seeing as we haven't got any clear-cut evidence, I mean, the only thing really is that 5G is supposed to interact with your cells, but it's not sufficient ionizing radiation in order to disrupt the mutations happening from your DNA mitosis, so that it's not actually going to cause that damage as suggested. But nonetheless, we are seeing people vandalize the masts and burn them down, which obviously isn't helpful at all, and I would strongly discourage anybody from those acts of vandalism. But that does not mean that YouTube should have the right, seeing as it comes from America, the land of freedom and free speech, to stop people from saying and sharing what they want to say and share. Surely it is, again, down to more speech in order to stop it. If you are saying, well, here is a group of people who believe this particular theory, and you can use conspiracy if you want, which, of course, the CIA did coin, you can use conspiracy theory, whatever, but they have a core belief, and you're shutting them down and saying, no, you can't say this. Well, surely you're only strengthening their cause by, if they think that the authorities are against them, and then you're clearly showing you're against them, then you're just strengthening that belief, in which case they think that they have to act more radically in order to make a change. So you're not helping this at all by trying to drive it underground. It only comes up more so. I mean, bear in mind, like Stalin read Marx, while those books were outlawed, but that's what made them more intriguing, in which case he found a copy of them and did then read through them. There we go. We'll go to Stalin instead of Hitler. Isn't that good? But that is always what happens. And then, of course, violence ensues, as it inevitably does. And that's already what we're seeing here with them burning down the masts. So it is not down to YouTube to decide what to push. And they are saying that now any content that disputes the existence or transmission of COVID-19, as described by the Chinese Health Organization and local health authorities, is in violation of YouTube policies. This includes conspiracy theories which claim that the symptoms are caused by 5G. So, again, even more so that they're buying into Chinese propaganda, because of course they are. That's where their biggest market is. Oh wait, no it isn't, because of the Chinese firewall. And they use WeChat instead. So, maybe not then. I mean, I understand why Hollywood do it, because they're a load of sellouts, but YouTube? How big is your audience there, really? Unless, of course, it's down to Google, in which case it's Operation Dragonfly, which was then to spy on individual people. They were working on the Chinese, then they said, okay, you found us, we're going to stop doing it, and then we're found to continue doing it for their social credit system, essentially. That's Google's part in China's social credit system, and it's pretty obvious that they would be doing the same sort of thing over here, seeing as they have already offered up individuals' data location to governments to say, hey, how about we share the user data on all of our individuals so you can track transmission. It'll all be anonymous, wink wink. Yes, that's just what things have come to. So, when they're saying it disputes the existence or transmission, well, what about disputing the transmission by saying it can travel 5 meters instead of 2 and lingers for half an hour? Does that mean that the video will be taken down because it's saying that it's worse than it is? Is that what they mean? Or that old people are worse affected? Is that okay? Or is it just underlying health conditions? At what point is it not okay? What about suggesting that, okay, if older people with underlying health conditions are worst affected, we can allow people to move about freely, and with the information that we can glean, if they think that it's going to damage them too much for them to be happy with it, either seriously ill or dead, then they will decide to self-quarantine and provided that they have family and friends, they will use the community to support them. And if they don't, then maybe it's about time that they decided to be a nicer person in order to attract people who were willing to help them. Or just pay for the services, because there'll still be people willing to work, as of course there are now with more delivery drivers. So that is another way. But if you suggest that, to say we don't have to shut down the whole economy, saying that it isn't money for lives, but it's lives for lives, because shutting down the economy leads to more cancer deaths, for example, because people don't have the money for treatment, they're not going to find time for the doctors, they can't afford it. Or, of course, it's just going to lead directly to suicides. So, with that, then it isn't money for lives. That doesn't follow, because unfortunately, money, which is a value ascribed to capability, is important, and therefore by extension the economy is as well. And if you hamper that too much, then you are still inadvertently destroying people's lives, if you don't allow them to make money and success and work for those around them, with those around them in mind. But hey, YouTube, go on then, stop people from mentioning things which they think are important and worth mentioning. Don't allow people to rebut them, because the algorithm doesn't know when somebody's in support or against it, so who knows how this is going to end up, and it's just going to be people not being able to mention coronavirus. Just like we saw when they were trying to cut down on children content by having videos including children there because of the paedophiles, that then they got rid of all the comments. And then of course the trans lobby found that they were particularly affected because they talk about sex a lot. Yes, that is where these things inevitably go. Even the people who wish to support it never think that the axe is going to swing around and hit them as well. For whatever reason, they lack that self-awareness. But I suppose if they were self-aware, they wouldn't be looking for it in the first place. If they were self-aware enough to realise it would come back to hit them, they would be self-aware to realise that they shouldn't be swinging the axe in the first place. So, until next time, stay safe. I would say talk to people in real life, but of course they're monitoring all your messages. They're flagging them up if there are suspicious words, and you're not allowed to meet in real life. So where do you think this goes? Like, at some point, and I think it's going to come pretty close if they're not very careful, it is just going to get to a point where people say, well, this is ridiculous. If you have a dozen police patrolling, and we've got 1,000 people out, and we think that this has gotten past the point which is acceptable, we will overpower you. It's similar to what we've seen around the world, of course. That, sure, you can have an armed policeman, but if you've got 100 people on them, they can literally tear them apart. And I'm not encouraging violence, but I am understanding where people come from. If they have a tyrannical ruler over them, that they will respond, because either way their life is over. So, hey, stay safe, and until next time, have a good one.